All right, welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today we are going to go back and get ready for another section of Who Dats. We're going to do a position group breakdown this time of the linebackers. It was highly requested. A lot of people are excited about some of the incoming freshmen, so we'll dive into the full position groups, talk about who we think is going to be starting, kind of the development of some of the players like Kanik. As we see, Brandon said thinks he is good, which is always good to have good players on the team. But before we get into it, thank you guys all for your continued support. We clearly appreciate it, but continue to subscribe, follow us on social media. It's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook now. So make sure to go like the Facebook page. Everything is linked down below. Everything's at Two Plane Sports. And then if you don't like looking at us, or if you don't have time to watch a YouTube video, check us out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also at Two Plane Sports, and also linked down below. So let's get started. The linebacker group, I think most of us when we talked about it last year, it was probably the weakest position group. And it seems like it's done a complete 180 with the addition of Venables, probably one of the best linebacker coaches and clearly one of the best defensive coaches in the country. And with the addition of Ted Roof to help him out with that group, a lot of guys have been shifting their attention to be joining the Sooners and moving over to Norman to play in the position. But it's a whole roster. Brum, do you want to go over who you think is going to be the starters and maybe a couple backups?
Yeah. So, I think next year with the departure of Asamoah being gone, Benino being gone, I think we're going to see Danny Stutzman be a full-time starter. He might sub out a little bit, but again, I think Venables is not going to do a whole bunch of rotation. He will a little bit to keep him somewhat fresh. I think you're going to see Stutzman play 65-70% of the snaps this fall. I think another guy you could see come in is Deshaun White, because White announced that he's coming back for a senior season. So I think Stutzman and White are the two for sure, no doubt. They're going to play a lot, if not just the starters. Another one that Stutzman will be competing with David Owegbu, but Owegbu can be moved between Deshaun White, the other position, which I think the other position, like the rush, is going to be the most up debate, up to, how they perform this spring and this, summer ball. You know, Clayton Smith should take the next step. I'm not sure if he will, but he looks like he could step in. But, someone that I think who might surprise some people that we're going to see get some playing time. And initially, I didn't think he would, but TD Roof might actually get a decent amount of playing time, not just because his dad's a defensive coordinator. Roof, he played, he played at App State. He's played at, two or three other schools, something like that. I forget. Was it Southern Miss? And I don't know. He played at a bunch of different places, but I know last year at App State, he had a solid season. I'm not saying that App State's at that level, at the level of Oklahoma, but he provides a lot of veteran leadership and a lot of experience that he's been about everywhere. And this is the biggest school he's ever been to, to play for. But I could see TD Roof getting some time. And, I think with this class coming in, counting TD Roof, I don't see why not Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kanik and Kip Lewis couldn't compete for time. Because like you said, Jose, this was one of the weakest positions, if not the weakest position group on the roster last year as far as depth goes. There was a lot of talent up top, but just the second and third level, it was inexperienced and it just wasn't there. But I feel like now with all the transfers and the new kids coming in and the year of experience, we could really see the next step taking form.
I agree that it was probably one of the weakest positions, if not the weakest on the team as far as last season goes. But now I think it's far and away the deepest. And I'm also going to agree with Brum on Deshaun White and Danny Stutzman being the two, pencil in starters. We can kind of just figure that those two are going to start. TD Roof, that take to me is a little bold. I mean, he is experienced, as you mentioned. He's going to bring a lot of that to the team, but I think Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kanik are just going to be better overall football players than him. I see them as guys who are going to play a decent amount. I think I don't know who I don't know if it'll be Kanik or McKenzie who kind of wins that freshman more playing time award thing. I guess we'll see because I think they're both really good, but I think one of those two guys is going to play a lot. I can see Kip Lewis pushing for playing time as well. And as we mentioned on Jaden Rose, he's a guy that we can see thrown in at a linebacker spot too every now and again. I mean, there's so many guys that can play linebacker on this team and play it at a high level that I don't see TD Roof, a career journeyman, kind of jumping in over some of these guys. No offense to him.
I mean, I'm just thinking, Roof, I'm just had to look it up to make sure I wasn't crazy, but he started off at Georgia Tech. He played in 11 games as a freshman. He had quite a few tackles, and I mean, he only had 17 in his freshman year. Then he played 10 games at Indiana. He had 39 tackles there. He sat out 2019. He went to App State in 2020. I believe that's where Ted Roof went. He appeared in 11 games. He had, 19 tackles, but 2021, he was all Sun Belt fourth team. I know it's fourth team, but he appeared in 13 of the 14 games. He totaled 68 tackles, 10 tackles for loss and 3 sacks, 2 interceptions and 1 forced fumble. I'm not saying he's going to be a full-time starter because I think the full-time starters you're going to see is Awegbu, Deshaun White, and Danny Stutzman, those 3. But I think Roof, the more I've thought about it, he's going to provide a lot of quality reps. I could see Kip Lewis getting a red shirt. And that's what I think. TD Roof might be able to allow these kids to be red shirted. And not saying that Roof, he's not going to be as good as what these kids are going to be, but he's going to provide good depth and we can keep the red shirt going. But that's just my thinking behind it. I might be crazy.
Yeah, I don't think it's completely nuts. I actually like that idea that TD Roof will be coming in to be the backup for Stutzman or Deshaun White. I don't think Awegbu will get as much playing time as you think. I think that's where the position where we could see maybe TD come in and take some time away from him, or a guy like Kanik. I think he's the most ready to play out of the freshmen. I know that Kobe is an exciting prospect and everyone was excited when he came back. Obviously, it was a big disappointment when he flipped initially to Texas after the Lincoln Riley thing, but
for like 30 minutes it felt like.
Yeah, it wasn't very long, but I think physically Kanik is the only one that's ready to play. And that I'm not saying that the other guys aren't, almost there. They're just not where Kanik is. And then in regards to like the outside linebacker position or the pass rusher, I do agree that's where like a lot of debate could be because we just lost probably the best defensive player that we had on last year's roster, Nick Bonito, and Clayton Smith seems to be like the heir apparent, but then we also have a guy like Marcus Stripling who made a big splash in the bowl game, and I think could be right there with Clayton to really push each other to see who's going to be the consistent starter once we get into the bulk of the season. I think we're going to see them rotate a lot in and out in those first 2 or 3 games to figure out who's going to be the most ready. But that wouldn't be a position where, like, let's say, God forbid, someone gets injured, the starter gets injured, game 5 or something. There's not going to be that big of a drop off between Marcus and Clayton. I think they're pretty much neck and neck, and it's just going to be who's going to edge out the other one to be the number 1. And then, number 2 is going to be pushing consistently throughout the year. So if one guy slips, I think that's going to be fair to think that if number 1 slips, number 2 is ready to take a spot without hesitating.
No. Another kid that I didn't mention initially that I think should take the next step and has the ability to is Shane Witter. Shane Witter, I felt like at times he flashed. He was like, he would pop up out of nowhere. For last season, he ended up totaling 27 tackles, 2 tackles for loss and a fumble recovery. He didn't play a whole lot. He played some in the Alamo Bowl, but I feel like him, and that was the whole deal with Alex Grinch and whatnot. I don't know. I remember Grinch called him out one time for, I can't really remember, but I remember in a press conference he did. But I feel like Witter, he just finished his sophomore season. Well, I guess he played in 2020, so I guess he's got going to have sophomore season part 2 coming up because of the COVID rules. But I really feel like he could take the next step. He could be the backup to Deshaun White, or, be a quality rep kind of guy. He plays special teams as well, which I personally love that he plays both. I think Witter really should take the next step. And if he doesn't, he might get buried on the depth chart with Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie, and Jaron Kanik arriving on campus. Like, this is his window. And if he doesn't take the next step this year, I feel like he might transfer, because these kids are going to be really good and they're going to really take up some of his playing time if he can't take that next step.
That trio you just mentioned, with Kanik, McKenzie, and Lewis, that's exciting stuff for the future. I personally see Kanik as a guy over McKenzie. Like I said, one of those two is going to get significant playing time this season, kind of like Danny Stutzman did last year as a freshman. I personally think. I don't know if you guys agree with that take or not. I see one of them being a guy that plays significant amount of time, a lot of downs, a lot of things like that. I also agree that Clayton Smith is a guy that should thrive in a Brent Venables defense with his just size, speed, athleticism. He should be able to, take the coaching from Venables and Roof and kind of be hopefully the next Benito, because you're right, he was the best defensive player on the team last year, I think, and he is gone. So it'd be nice if Clayton Smith can replace him, and I think he has all the tools to replace him.
Yeah, and something that we talked about a lot last season was the groups. I don't know if it was just they were always caught off guard when it came to protecting running quarterbacks, but I think this season that'll be a big emphasis in this defensive scheme. I don't know, for those of you that haven't been able to watch the assistant coach press conferences, Todd Bates was talking about how they're going to be running the same defense that Venables ran in Clemson. And he threw out some stats during that part of the conference. And he said, it's not by chance that we are consistently leading, that defense was consistently leading the country in tackles for loss and sacks. And I think that a lot of it is clearly their coaching, but they're figuring out what they need to do to keep that quarterback in the pocket and make sure that he's not going out for 15, 20 yards or converting on a 3rd and long like we saw a lot last year. So I think the players that will be playing most are going to be the ones that have that nose for the ball, like we talked about with Danny Stutzman last year. And we saw when he played, and a guy like Kanik, who when we see his high school highlights, he is just taking off as soon as he sees that ball get out of the quarterback's hands, or he sees the quarterback even think about running. They're going to just dive on it and make sure that guy's not getting past the line of scrimmage. And if he does, he's going to regret it and not want to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going down another guy. I'm just, I talk about Witter, and now there's another guy that I think is kind of a victim of the last coaching staff. I just feel like Joseph Wete, however you say it, Wete, Joseph Wete, however you say it. I've struggled with that last name, but he came from Gonzaga High School with Caleb Williams. The year before he came here, he redshirted in 2019. He played, mainly on special teams in 2020. So the first 2 years of his career, he's a redshirt freshman coming into this season, and he only played in the Western Carolina game. He's 6'4", 230 pounds as a linebacker. I feel like with that size, he came out of high school as the number 12 weak side defensive end, a 4-star. I feel like he has all the talent in the world, and I just don't feel like the last staff developed him. So I feel like he could take another step this year. I mean, as a redshirt sophomore going into this fall because of COVID, and he's been with the program for 3 years. He could be playing his 4th year as a redshirt sophomore, which is insane. I feel like he's going to have to take the next step because of the core group that's coming in as these 3 freshmen. There's talent there. I just feel like the last staff wasn't really getting it all out. And I think Venables, if you can't play well and you're being coached by Venables, maybe the scheme and maybe it just, at that point, I feel like it's just not going to work. But I feel like we're going to see him potentially compete for some playing time. I mean, he's 6'4", 230. Why wouldn't he play? Just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. And another linebacker that, again, has to take that step or they're going to potentially just get buried in the depth chart is Jamal Morris. He was coming out of high school. He was a 4-star prospect. He was his redshirt sophomore season last year. Like you said, with a couple of the other guys, it's going to be a repeat because of the free COVID season that they have. But there's a lot of guys that need to take this next step. And like you said, there's a good chance that with how the defense was going from looking from the outside, there just wasn't it was either the wrong scheme or just poor development for some of these guys, but they've got to figure out how they can move up to the next level.
Jose, I will say Jamal Morris is actually transferring. He got buried. He's at the University of Houston.
Okay, good call out then. I was looking at the roster from last year, and I guess I haven't updated that. My bad. But I think just the general concept of what you've been saying for a lot of these guys that are returning is you got to take that step forward and take advantage of the coaching that you have, or you're going to get buried because this recruiting class is something like this recruiting class is going to be consistent. We're going to get really talented linebackers that will take your spot if you're not ready to play.
But I mean, that the what happened to Morris could happen to Shane Witter, as Brum mentioned earlier, could happen to, I don't think Clayton Smith is necessarily safe. I think he can be really good, should be really good, but it's deep. TD Roof, I mean, he's not going to transfer obviously because he's a 1-year guy, but he can end up getting buried. Like, it's a deep position, and it's only going to continue to get deeper and better as long as Brent Venables is at the helm of this team.
Yeah, it's the depth right now is never going to get any worse than it is. Like from here on out, it's only going to get better. And we're going to have a recruiting video. Brandon's dogs are raging right now, but it is what it is. The depth is only going to get better. So like if you don't start playing in the first 2 or 3 years, the odds of you really competing for time and getting quality reps is probably not going to be great, because we're going to have a video coming out here later this week about this, the recruiting, fiasco and huge event that OU had, with like 15, 20 prospects on campus. There was a lot of defensive talent on campus. It was mostly defensive players. And a lot of kids want to come play for OU. I mean, there were kids leaving without scholarship offers. That's how much interest is going on right now. And there's genuine interest. So if you can't compete with the group that's on campus right now, it's going to be hard. And I feel like Venables does not care if you're a registered senior or a true freshman. If the true freshman is outplaying you, you're not playing as a registered senior. There's no loyalty at this level. And there shouldn't be. You should be the best player, should play the most snaps, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've said it with other groups as well. I know the last time we covered it was corners, but this year is going to be wide open for everyone. And I know we said like the pencil and starters in our minds are Stutzman and White, but if they don't perform to the standards that they need to, they're not playing. And that's just kind of what it is now. You're not going to get playing time because of seniority or because you had a couple of flashes here and there, but this coaching staff seems to want to put the best product out on the field, but they're not going to they want to balance it. I think that's been a theme that every time that Venables talks about how he's running his program is football is going to end at some point, and that he's preparing his guys for post football, but he also needs to worry about the product on the field. And if you can't perform to the standards that he needs to, he's going to still love you, but he's not going to put you out on the field to not succeed as a team and as an individual at that point.
Yeah. So something that we do, or that I do, is we do the over under on playing, snaps. This position group was highly requested on the last one, and this is why we went directly to it. So there's a lot of hype with the 3 incoming freshmen, as we've talked about, and rightfully so. I mean, they're all 6'1" or 6'2", 200 plus. I believe McKenzie's 245. Kanik is 215, and then Lewis is 200. And that's before they got with Schmitty. I mean, they could be 250, 235. I don't know where they're at now, but whatever, something's changed probably at this point between McKenzie and Kanik. They might be heavier or lighter. So with that, a lot of people are excited about him, and I agree. So we'll start with how much time will we think we see them playing. I'm going to set defensive snap percentage. Kip Lewis, in my opinion, I believe he's going to redshirt this year, but you guys might not agree with me. I'm going to set his snap percentage at 8%. I think it's going to be under. I think he's going to redshirt. He might play, the first 3 or 4 games if it gets out of hand. I just feel like he would really benefit from a year under someone's watch, under the coaching staff's watch.
I also think he's a redshirt guy, so I'm going to agree with you on the under on this one.
Yeah.
Same.
Jose. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a slight against him because he really, he was a 3-star for a long time. He jumped way up in 247's ratings towards the end of the cycle. People really started to realize that he has a lot of potential, and he stayed solid all the way through, even with Lincoln Riley leaving and Grinch leaving and all them. So I think he's going to be really good. I just think he's the least polished of the 3. I'm going to go with Kobe McKenzie next. Like I said, he's 6'2", 245 out of Lubbock, Texas. I'm going to set, I don't think he's going to redshirt. I'm going to set his snaps at, let's say, 18%. I could see him getting a few, 5 to 10 a game, somewhere in there. Jose, what do you think?
I do think he is going to be a guy that will redshirt. So I'll hit the under, but I just don't know if he's physically ready to play at the college level.
I mean, he is 245 pounds.
I'm going to disagree with those two. I think he's definitely ready to play at the college level, but I have him in that 10 to 15 snaps. So I guess I'll take the over, probably the 20-25% range. I was talking all show. I can't decide if it's going to be Kanik or McKenzie. And just because I wrote Kanik's name on the board because it's easier than writing McKenzie out, I'm going to ride with Kanik as the guy who's going to play more as a freshman. So I'll take Kobe at about 20-25%, 10 to 15 snaps per game. But next season, I think the trio of Stutzman, Kanik, and McKenzie is going to be scary.
Yeah, I think he's going to play over, not by much, but I feel like at 6'2", 245, he's going to have all spring and summer to be with Schmitty. Whether they're going to want him at 235 or 255, I don't know, but I don't see him changing his weight a whole lot. So the last guy is going to be Jaron Kanik, which I feel like a lot of people that are watching this video are extremely excited about, and rightfully so. He's a freak athlete, out of Hayes, Kansas, 6'2", 215, I believe, off the top of my head. Can run like a deer, hits hard. I think Kobe's probably going to play more than Kanik will, because I think they're going to want Kanik at a little bit heavier. I think that he's going to need to get up to 230, 235 to play linebacker. At 215, 210, 215 coming out of high school. I feel like he's going to play less than McKenzie, but I might be wrong. So I'm going to set his over under at 25%. I'm going to take the under. But I think
McKenzie's over under 18%, and then he's saying that Jaron Kanik's going to play less than him and set it at 25.
Well, because I know I got to take into consideration of you guys. Yeah, I got to take into consideration with you guys. But in my opinion, I think he's more in that 10 to 15% range of playing time. But that's why I set a higher number, because I knew I was going to I'm trying to make it harder on you guys in your mind.
It is hard.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I said it just with Kobe. I don't think Kobe's ready. And earlier I mentioned that I think Kanik is, even though his weight might not be there, he's fast, and I know that he's a dude that's going to be similar to Danny the way they play, to just go break for the ball. So I think Kanik will be playing more. I'll go with the over, but it'll be just barely. I think he's going to be in the 30% tops. And it's just because of the depth. I mean, if someone were to get injured, I think he's going to be the guy that will be slotted in.
I'll take the big time over. Borderline starter by the end of the season, I think, or by midway through the season. I think he's going to have that Stutzman type season for us. He's going to be that guy this year. And like I said, next year, that trio of McKenzie, Kanik, and Stutzman is going to be nasty. But for this season, I'm going to ride high, and Kanik, we'll say Kanik is a starter by the end of the season or midway through the season. So I'm taking the over by a good amount.
I hope so. You know, as the roster comes out, if you see Kanik actually weighing about 230 pounds, if he can put on 15 pounds that fast, I could see him taking that step. But I feel like at 215, that's a little light. It just depends on how fast he can put on weight. Kobe, I feel like probably will get toned down to probably a flat 240, 235, just to keep the speed up and just be able to hit hard. I just, Stutzman, he's 6'3", 230. I feel like Kanik would be good at 6'2", 228 to 232, somewhere in there. That's kind of where I'm projecting him to be, his playing weight. I'm just coming up with numbers. I'm basically making this up. I feel like I'm making it harder for you guys, but I want to hear what everyone has to say with my over-unders for these three guys. I'm just curious what everyone thinks. I feel like everyone's going to have a strong opinion on this group, and rightfully so. Venables is going to play the best guy. The sky is the limit with this group, in my opinion.
Yeah. Brandon, do you want to go ahead and do your end of video challenge, bud?
Yeah. So who was your guys' favorite linebacker in this class? I feel like we have a lot of Jaron Kanik, a lot of Cody McKenzie in the comment section, which is fine, and it makes sense, and they should be. Also, who do you guys have as the starting linebacking core for next season? We mentioned Deshaun White and Danny Stutzman as kind of the locks. I'm picking Kanik, obviously, as one of the guys to start a lot too. Who do you guys see as that starting linebacker core?
I want Shane Witter to take the next step because he hits hard, and that's what I'm most hopeful for. Is Shane Witter
for Shane Witter? I like Shane Witter too.
Hitting hard is dope. So
yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens there. We're going to get to see a lot of what could potentially be on the field in the fall here in about a month for the spring game. So a lot of good stuff is coming up. Like Brumbaugh said, or later in the week, we will be releasing some recruiting videos to talk about this last weekend. And then we'll also focus on the weekend here, I think at the end of March, to talk about some of the guys that we'll be visiting at that time. So yeah, let us know what you think. Tell us who your favorite linebacker is. Who do you think is going to be starting next fall? When you do that, make sure you hit subscribe on the way out. Make sure to turn on that notification bell. Check out all the links in the description: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you want to listen to your podcast. Go follow us on all social media. Follow us on that preferred podcast platform, and make sure to come back and never miss an episode. Share the videos with your friends, your family, Facebook pages, whatever you want to do. We appreciate everything that you guys do for us. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll see you next time.